Hello, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday with 3W. Wellness Wednesday is sponsored by 3W Medical for Women, a nonprofit medical clinic offering free of charge or low-cost reproductive health services to women in the Seattle area, regardless of income or insurance status. 3W does not profit off of the reproductive health choices women make. The information shared in this podcast is the opinion of the speaker or speakers. Medical information is not intended as individual medical consultation, but for general education only. Always consult your own health professional for personalized advice regarding medical decisions. And if you're in the Seattle area, consider making an appointment to consult with us. I'm Helen Nguyen, CEO and co-founder of 3W Medical for Women and the host of today's podcast. Hi there, Wellness Wednesday listeners. This is yours truly, Helen Nguyen, CEO of WHAMS 3W, here in the podcast room once again. It is with great honor and privilege to have this amazing guest speaker join me today from an amazing organization called SOFESA. And it's this organization that's helping the homeless community, low-income families in Southern California. Jess, who's our guest speaker today, she represents this organization. She runs this organization, and I ran into her at a conference, and we both had the same purse, and that's what is connecting us right now. But upon introducing myself, upon connecting over our love of this really cool fashion statement that we had on, I learned a quick synopsis of her organization. I was like, okay, we got to get you on this podcast because, as a native Seattleite, and many of you know, in Seattle, we have a huge homeless community that's occupying our city, and our government officials hasn't come up with a good plan on how to address this community within our own community. And I've been reading about SOFESA and their approach to homelessness, and Jess herself has an amazing story, and I just wanted to bring her on. So welcome, Jess, to our podcast.
No, thank you so much. I feel very, very happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you. You'll get to see snippets of our podcast gets its audio and visual these days. And just Jess, you are just glowing. What are you drinking? I need some of that.
Honestly, it's salt water and a couple and bone broth. I'm totally into
Whoa.
the saltwater bone broth thing right now.
Whoa. Okay,
But
noted.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
you're just
appreciate that.
lovely. And it's
Thank
over
you.
Zoom and you're glowing. And I'm like, I need to have some of that. All right.
It might be the lighting too. It might
Uh,
be the lighting.
okay, my tangent about how beautiful you are is going to be wrapped into this podcast. But Jess, would you please tell us who you are, what you do, what is SOFESA, and what is your organization's mission?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I'm Jess Echeverry, and 25 years ago, I founded and am the current executive director of a 501c3 nonprofit in Los Angeles called SOFESA. And what we do is we accompany homeless
Mhm,
families,
mhm,
low income families through all stages of their life and their experiences. And we also accompany the local community in understanding and educating and providing resources for them as well. And really understanding the lived experience of being homeless.
mm,
Our mission is to become, to be, and to enable others to be what's called the middle ground between the housed and the unhoused, because we
mm,
feel like there's nothing there that's bringing those two demographics of people together in a healthy relationship that
mm,
helps heal the community in general.
mhm, mhm. And and I know you have such a huge heart for the homeless community because of your own lived experience, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I mean, I started Sophia 25 years ago because I heard this kind of calling inside of me that said, go back out there.
Mm,
And it's because, but in my own life, I spent 7 years what's called housing unstable. And
Mm,
so homeless has lots of different personas. It's one of the things that we teach the local community about in our webinars and in our
mm,
talks that we give to local
mhm,
community members.
mhm.
But so I was in quite a few different personas of homelessness. I was living in I began my homelessness at age 14. I was living in the closets of my schoolmates' bedrooms where their parents didn't even know I was a runaway.
Wow.
Yeah, I lived in shelters. I lived
Mhm,
in motels. I lived
mhm,
on the street.
mhm.
I lived back in family members' homes. So for over 7 years, my living experience was transient and unstable, which is really what homelessness is. I think
Mm,
a lot of our housed community members and business owners and even, large nonprofit organizations and politicians think that homelessness is that person on the sidewalk that you drive by every day. But
mm,
there are different personas to homelessness, and I
mhm,
experienced pretty much all of them within a 7-year period
mhm.
and suffered the traumas and chaos of being in those experiences and came out of it at 21 having given birth to my 3rd child by 21 and alone, living on welfare. I was a battered and abused woman, but it was my first time having a roof over my head, having a child in my care and custody
Mm,
at 21. And that is what started. I used social services, I used welfare to its full potential.
mhm.
I used it to help myself get financially stable and stay out of homelessness. And a few years in doing that, I actually encountered my now husband of 22 years. And that healthy relationship helped me to heal from the
Mhm.
traumas that I experienced even before being homeless. Yeah, there's people who experience homelessness hit the streets with trauma already for the most
Mhm.
part.
14. That's so young.
Yeah.
That's so young, and it just makes me, like, choke up.
Yeah, it's
Mm,
it's hard. It's my household was I love my parents, both my parents. I always do this disclaimer
mhm.
because people end up mad at my parents after I give an interview, but it's not
Mm,
their fault, you know?
mhm,
They did the best they could at the time with what they had and what they knew. But it was a tough household to come up in. I experienced child sexual abuse and rape at an early age, which led to a rebellion, which led to me starting to begin to run away. Pregnant at 16, being forced to give that child away.
mm,
Pregnant again at 18,
mhm,
feeling like I had no choice in having an abortion.
mm,
Experiencing 2 suicide attempts, one at 18 and one at 19, and then pregnant again at 21. And really being freed and being able to have my own place because I was in a abusive situation that sent me to the hospital. I was beaten and thrown through a plate glass window, and it was the nurse at the hospital that begged me to let her help me,
mhm,
and I did, and that
mhm,
turned into a restraining order, which turned into charges, which turned into him being put in jail and me being alone and pregnant, but with a roof over my head and food in my refrigerator for the first time ever in
mhm.
my life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because 'cause I'm speechless. I don't know what to say about that. Because I have I can think of my little cousin who's 14 right now, and I just don't wish that on anyone, what you went through on anyone. And so what are some misconceptions you think that people have about a young girl like you on the streets when you were 14 in your teens? Like what were some things that you could have said to someone, when they walked past you when you were on the streets or something like that?
And I said a lot of things to people that walked past me. I don't know if I would repeat those things on air, but no, listen, here's the thing that's important to know,
Yeah.
right? It's bad things happen to good people. My
Yes.
husband's always that's like a mantra. He's always whispered in my ear, right? And it's
Mhm,
and it's
mhm,
okay. I SOFESA wouldn't exist if I hadn't experienced everything I just shared with you. And
mhm,
so
mhm,
good has come from it.
mhm,
But as a 14-year-old, I didn't have the support system I needed. 'Cause I didn't have the support system I needed. 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 I
Mhm.
think that's important for us to learn from,
Yeah.
right? At that age and the struggles that you're having, especially like I didn't have technology. We didn't have technology like we do nowadays back when I was homeless.
Mhm.
It's a whole different ball game.
Mm,
I didn't have the support I needed. I also, the people who would outreach to us on the streets were mostly evangelizing, which is fine. I don't have a problem with evangelizing. It's just it wasn't what I needed at that moment,
mm,
and it turned me off. It turned me away. I felt like they were using me for themselves
mm,
to feel good about themselves. So that's something that is something to consider. Women, girls, and young boys all together have a different experience on the streets than men.
okay.
Completely different experience.
Can you tell me
Uh,
more about that? What does that mean?
yeah. Well, on the streets, it's gosh, how do I explain? So, as a woman, you're inferior on the street. As a girl, you're inferior. As a young boy,
Mhm.
teenage boy, you're inferior.
Mm,
It's just kind of the status that
mhm.
happens. You're
Mhm.
more easily overpowered. You're taken advantage of more.
There's a vulnerability because
There's
of
definitely a thank you, yeah, that's the
yeah.
word I was for that escaped me.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
worries.
you are much more vulnerable on the
Okay.
streets, and what you have is commodity, and I'm speaking about our bodies,
Mhm.
because when you live on the streets have their own culture and economy,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
What we share when we give our webinars is you have to commit. After a certain amount of time, once you hit the street, you can survive for a little bit, but you have to decide whether you're gonna live this way or you're gonna live this way.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
usually that's about 28 to 32 days, and then you have to commit. Otherwise, you're gonna die or you're just gonna keep experiencing just superiorly terrible things. And so you commit. You commit to the lifestyle. You commit to, prostitution, you commit to theft, you commit to vandalism, you commit to vagrancy, you commit to that's the economy of the streets, drug dealing,
Mm.
all of it. And so when you commit to that, there are players in that are more powerful than other players. In Los Angeles, especially, you also have gangs involved.
Mm.
Not a lot of people understand that there's a life cycle to an encampment.
Mhm.
Right? So
Mhm.
like, when SOFESA drives the streets of Los Angeles, we see one person on a sidewalk. We're like, "Okay, that's the start." We keep an eye on it. We see another person come close, but not right next to.
Mm.
Then we go, "Okay, that's gonna be an encampment within a certain amount of time if enforcement doesn't come in." And the reason why that's important is because encampments are where that crime usually is birthed and lived, pretty
Mm.
much.
Mm.
It's that economy community that happens. So, it's different when you're in and out of a motel, when you're living out of your car. Again, these are the different personas of homelessness, or some people say
Mhm.
housing instability.
Mhm.
But yeah,
What's your opinion when people are like, "Well, the people on the streets are probably all mentally ill."
yeah, yeah, we get that a lot too. So
Okay.
we do a myth breaking session. We have a specific webinar that
Mhm.
just talks about the myths of homelessness, the mythology
Mhm.
surrounding homelessness.
Mhm.
They don't want a job. They want to be there. They don't want my
Mhm.
help.
Mhm.
They don't like the food I'm giving. They're too
Mhm.
picky. They're all mentally ill. It's a
Mhm.
mental health crisis. So, and here's the thing, in all of those things, there is a small amount of truth because
Sure.
that's where myths come from, right?
Right.
But
Yes. Yeah.
what's frustrating is that people aren't taking the time to understand them at a deeper level, and that's
Mm.
what SOFISA tries to do for the local community, is to break those things down. The mental illness, the actual diagnosable, like we're talking bipolar, schizophrenia, the
Mhm.
numbers are under 20% of the homeless
Mm.
population. Under
Mm.
20%. So what I like to tell people is, okay, so how come we're not talking about the over 80%
Mhm.
that don't have these mental health disorders? How
Mhm.
come those, the lesser number gets most of the attention, right? And that is used. actually against the homeless community, honestly, in media
Mm,
and social media. So you have 79% of women who are homeless have suffered child sexual abuse and trauma as a child.
mm,
79% of women who are homeless. So, and I share that stat number 1 to also to confirm and to back up what I said, that women have a different experience on the
mhm,
street than men do,
mm,
because we do.
mhm,
And but also because what leads someone to the streets isn't lack of housing, isn't drugs, isn't mental illness.
mhm,
It's not, for the most part. The number one reason for someone landing homeless or on the streets is a catastrophic break in support,
mm,
i.e., family,
mhm,
right? That last person that was holding on to them and helping them in some way or another so that they wouldn't go over that edge and hit the
mhm,
street
mhm,
has been broken.
mm,
And look, and for probably good reason for the most part,
mm,
because we're talking about people who've experienced trauma, usually child adverse traumatic events, and,
mm,
so childhood trauma gone unhealed. And when we have trauma and we don't have the right support, what do? We try and numb it.
mm,
Right?
mhm,
We do that by drinking alcohol, by
mm,
taking drugs, illicit
mm,
drugs as well as prescription drugs. A
mhm,
lot of our homeless moms that we encounter are addicted to prescription drugs,
mhm,
and what led to their homelessness was an injury they suffered
mm,
that then led to, a prescription drug addiction, which
mhm,
then changed all their healthy decision making. Right? And then that one family member who says, "You're not listening to me about getting help. You can't
mhm,
live here anymore. You gotta go. I'm sorry."
mhm,
There's a lot of myths surrounding homelessness,
right.
especially around mental health, but there's also the mental health that happens from being in that situation.
Mhm,
It is hell. It is living in hell. You're
mm,
constantly worried about whether you're gonna be attacked, jumped, stolen from, raped, abused, taken advantage of. You're constantly in a state of, you know, just struggle and chaos. And the human person is just such a miracle.
mm,
And so for the most part, when we encounter somebody on the street, their mind is protecting them, means they've brought them into a mental state
mhm,
that helps them to stay alive and cope with their actual living circumstances. So, to give you an example, we'll do outreach and I'll see John at my local
mhm,
park. He's got his tent up, he's been there for a little while. And every time I see John, good morning. Hey, first 10, 15 minutes, it's like as if John lives in the house next to me,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
then all of a sudden John says to me, "Well, my girlfriend is in, Iraq collecting her $45 million inheritance from her family, and she'll be back soon." Right? It's like, for the
mm,
most part, people will hear that and go, "Oh, he's mentally ill." Right? He must have type of mental health disorder. No, John has created an alternate reality for himself so
mm,
that he can wake up every morning and live in the circumstances that he's living in.
mhm,
Right?
mhm.
That reality, that alternate reality is keeping John alive. That's what it's
Yes.
doing.
That's I've
You know what I mean?
never heard it described to me like that. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
mind-blowing.
It's how our brain functions so that we live, 'cause we
So
were created to breathe and live
yeah,
and
it's a
be.
it's like a coping mechanism.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
and the thing that I see is people just writing John off as mentally ill, and he needs to be
Mm.
somewhere getting mental health. He
Mhm,
does. I
mhm,
agree that he needs mental health, but I also see something deeper, which is if you tell him that's not true, it might shatter his hope, and he might go harm himself or
mhm,
OD on drugs
mm,
or go hurt someone else in response. So it's
mhm,
kinda like, this is where John is right now,
mm,
which is what SOFESA does. We acknowledge the truth behind what they're experiencing living on the street,
mhm,
and then we create a relationship with them to help draw them into that healthy reality, right? Because
mm,
he's not gonna come out of there until he feels safe. And I'm telling you, it's not gonna be putting him in a hotel room and paying for it that's gonna make him feel safe. That's
Mm.
gonna isolate him and make him feel alone, and
Mhm.
who knows what he'll do after feeling isolated and alone.
Mhm.
So for
Mhm.
SOFESA, it's acknowledging where people are and accompanying them and
Mhm.
giving them a relationship that they can trust, that they can count on. We have a 24-hour text line for all of our families, that just need to be heard. And yeah,
Wow.
and so that's the accompaniment that we do. And
Mhm.
that's my very long response to your question about mental health. Sorry about.
You're totally fine. I mean, it's just I was jotting down some notes,
Yeah.
and you mentioned I just wanted to follow up really quick on how people end up on the street sometimes is there's that one relationship that it's like the last straw, and they're like, "You either get clean, go to rehab, submit to my resources or what I'm asking you to do, or you can leave," right? And in your opinion, like, what's the balance? What's the balance between enabling someone,
Yeah.
loving them through this addiction or trauma that they're experiencing? What's the balance? Because I could see I'm torn right now in my brain about how to approach those types of conversations. I feel like I would really play the hard ass route and go like, "Okay, well, you're the one that's the addict or you're the one that's in crisis and you're not adhering to my advice or you're not adhering to the resources I wanna give you. I want to help you, but I also can't watch you succumb to the addiction or succumb to whatever that you're dabbling with." So what's the balance for you? How would you approach or give advice to family members who really love this person, but they don't know what to do?
Yeah. I mean, that's it's a very individual circumstance situation,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
Mm,
But as a whole, it is how SOFISA has to think and operate, because when we have resources come in, we distribute them to our families. And if we distribute resources without the relationship, then we just become another transaction where they can get resources.
mm,
So there is a fine line there, and one that we've discovered over the past 25 years of how much to give before we stop with the resources and only provide relationship.
mm,
So it
mm,
does happen where, and it is hard. Listen,
mhm, mhm,
journeying in a relationship with someone who's has so much trauma and chaos and just very vulnerable circumstances, drug addiction, mental health issues, all of
mhm.
that based on their traumas. It's a sacrifice and a suffering that you're
Yeah,
choosing to go through.
yeah.
And I think each person has to determine and discern how far they're called to go, right? But also to learn, if I continue doing this, am I enabling
Mm,
or am I really helping them move forward in their goal as well? And so each person has to discern within their own situation what the next step is. And so Sofisa does that with all of our families as well.
mm,
This particular family, we've done this now for 25 years. We
mhm,
see the patterns, right? The
mhm,
patterns
mhm,
of behavior in
mhm,
journeying with
mhm,
and accompanying homeless families. And there's, the first time phrase, that we have is all about building trust. They don't trust us. They need to learn to trust us. We have to do things that show them that we're healthy. We don't want anything from them. We have our own experience with what they're experiencing, and so that takes a certain amount of time. And then once we pass that phase, then we move into, okay, we're still providing resources
mm,
even though they trust us, but there's also something in the back of their minds where if we don't stop just providing resources, then we're going to be training them, which is what's happened with the homeless. We've trained the homeless on the street to do everything in a transactional way. When we encounter someone on the street, it's a transaction. That's what, for the most part, that's what's happening. That's why Sofisa believes the opposite, right?
mm,
So when we encounter someone on the street, we believe they have something to offer us,
mm,
not immediately we have something to offer them.
mm,
And that
mm,
recognizes their dignity as a human person, right?
mm.
I was just on a Zoom call with someone speaking about this earlier today as well, and they were like, "Yeah, because these people are people." And I'm like,
Yes.
"Yeah, that
They
sounds
are.
so simple, but these people are
Are
people."
people.
You know,
Yeah.
and like that should be at the root. It's a two-way street. And
Mhm.
so if you're looking at someone like you're not doing the things that you need to do to help yourself, then you can end up feeling like it's a one-way relationship, which will then cause that break to happen. You
Mm.
know, maybe saying, what differently can I do in this circumstance? That might be something else that you need besides the roof, besides
Mhm.
the bill paying, besides the getting you out of this situation.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
that's always something that I think each person can discern.
That's such a I mean, just looking at your website, just I love your mission, and I first of all, your mission statement, it's awesome because you literally say, pre-COVID, you were beginning to be unsuccessful. That is, like, so cool to me that you're able to put that type of vulnerability out there. That speaks volumes to me. And then the next thing, your solution and your approach is, uh, just what you were saying. It's like you're not there to solve anybody's problems. You're actually there to heal. You're actually there to seek healing together, because that person who's the person that's living on the street has something to offer. And if we really believe that, then the person receiving that offering is healing in some way as well.
Yeah.
So the two-way street, the non-transactional approach benefits this ripple effect. It's like more it's bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
It's bigger than ourselves. It's bigger than what we think we know. In helping, in approaching it in that way, we receive. We receive from that as well. It just it reminds me of, like, what we do here at 3W in a small way. When I started 3W, or when my friend and I started 3W, we thought we were in the position of, "How do we help? How do we help?" Right? And that's always been the case, but
And that's for most people, by the way.
right, right, and that's a good place to start. That's a good
Yeah.
place to start. It fuels to create organizations, but I always tell my donors and supporters, "You don't understand. It has healed me. It has helped me." It's not just the patient that walks through the door that's asking for help. Her story, her experiences, her humility, her vulnerability helped the people that gets to help her. And that
Mhm.
that did not click for me until until we were knee deep into creating 3W and starting to see patients. It has changed my life. It's changed my world.
Fascinating that, people think that because somebody is in a particular situation that there's nothing they can receive from them. And it's
Yeah.
such a very limited way of thinking about encountering someone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
'Cause it's really what it's about. I can encounter somebody standing in line at the grocery store, and I can encounter somebody on a park bench who's
Mhm.
homeless.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Or walking by and seeing them living in their car or
Mhm.
cleaning up around their car, because
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
we have a lot of those neighbors in my neighborhood,
Mhm.
and I look for those opportunities too. It's like, "Oh, do you want me to help you clean up around your car?" "Oh."
Mhm.
And, that's the thing about homelessness, it's become an industry, unfortunately.
Mm.
And that's what Sophie's is trying to do, is change the chip on how people see and view and think about the
Mhm.
homeless experience, because
Mhm.
it's different. The lived experience of homelessness is not. I think if people understood what we go through being in that situation,
Mhm.
it would provide so much more context, and it would eliminate so many myths
Mm.
about the homeless person,
Mhm.
because the way that it's become, the industry that it's become is so transactional that, and it's like I said earlier, like the homeless expect a transaction from you.
Mm.
When we go and we outreach to the homeless on the street, they're not looking for tenderness or compassion or friendship.
Mm.
When I encounter them and I give them that, it's a shock to them. They're like,
Mm,
"Wait, you're not asking me to leave. You don't want anything from me, and you're not sticking a clipboard in my hand trying to get me into a motel and get me ID so I can do that. So
mm,
what is it you want from me? Nothing. I don't want anything. Your
mm,
name? What's your name?
mhm,
I know how it feels to be out here. I know it's lonely. I know it's isolating.
mm,
I'm just here to say hi, make sure
mhm,
you're good,
mhm,
you know?" And for them, it's so hard for them to comprehend that because they're so used to being transacted with and used that even they expect that and don't know what to do with authentic hospitality.
mhm,
They don't. And that's what we spend most of our time doing when we outreach the first few times is proving to them
mhm,
that we are authentically seeking, healthy relationship with them.
mhm,
Just
mhm.
blows their
Well
mind.
well, because 'cause they've probably never experienced a healthy relationship before.
Right. Or if they have, it's been a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And they don't think that they're worthy to have that again or
Mm,
anymore.
mm,
Yeah. The loss of dignity and worth being in that environment. What that environment requires of you, not just
mhm,
mentally, but physically as well.
mhm.
It it's horrendous, which I'm
Yeah,
sure maybe your clinic sees from time
yeah,
to time.
yeah.
The effects on women's bodies of being
Uh,
in that experience.
Not a majority, but there are patients that come in and their bodies have been transactional. Their bodies have been used in a very transactional way, and so when we offer care and look at her, just, like, make eye contact and just go, "How do we love you today? How do we" ho that's all we wanna do, is get you to a point today where someone that you're heard, you're seen, you're loved, and the amount of just those small things, like getting her a water before, a cup of coffee or whatever before she's in an exam room. I had a woman I had a patient come in and she was homeless, and she was afraid to sit on our furniture. 'Cause she was like, "I'm just gonna make it dirty." I was like, "Well, you're not sitting on the floor, so you're gonna sit on our armchair, and it's so what? Like, please sit." And it was, like, the first time someone asked her to sit on something clean, you
Mhm.
know? It was like, just moments like that that I reflect on. I was like, "Gosh, like, I am in such a blessed position to say that to someone." And
Yeah.
how do I not take it as, like, "Oh, wow, I just made her feel better." I did, but it's not like it's something anybody should do. Everybody should do. And in our bathrooms, we have, like, feminine products available. So you can come in and grab as much as you like, and I had a past employee that was like, "We shouldn't put that out. They're just gonna come," homeless population are just gonna come in and they know that it's free and they're just gonna take it. And I was like, "Yeah, that's what it's for." Like, if she needs feminine products and I can give it to her for free, I should fill her pockets with it. Like, come on. Like, what do you expect her to do? Free bleed in her tent? Like, come on. Like,
Yeah,
it,
and I
it
can
would
guarantee you that she's probably grabbing the amount that she's grabbing because there's 3 other women
yeah,
that she's living on the streets in and around or near or know of that she
yeah,
wants to bring back to.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I was like, we have enough money to get more. Just refill it tomorrow. It just like
Yeah.
that kind of conversation was like I remember as a social worker, I was leading a clothing drive, and that evening my office got broken into and a whole bunch of clothes got taken, and I was like really upset. I was like, why would they do this? We were doing a good thing and now, half of the clothes is gone. And my coworker just looked at me and said, "Helen, they needed it. And they might have not made our window to grab the free clothes that we were giving out, so they broke in and took it from you, and they must have really needed it." And I just was like I just felt so horrible of my instant thought of how could these people steal from us and we were doing a good thing, and she just reminded me like they didn't take anything else. They just took the clothes, dude. Like calm down. And yeah, so anyways, all that to say like how dare that I had these ill thoughts about people stealing from me when I was already giving it out for free. It's like, come on, Helen. Oh
Well,
boy.
and here's the thing, and it's actually important to think about in process, right? That as a homeless person, we liked rules. We liked boundaries. We actually liked a law enforcement that came in that was cool with us, right?
Mm,
There's a difference
mhm,
in law enforcement. We know the ones when we learn really quick which ones aren't and which ones are.
mm,
And we want the cool ones to come in and have their presence there because less bad stuff happens.
mhm,
People follow the rules and fall in line when
mm,
that presence is there.
mm,
So it's this idea that somebody's breaking in, the act of breaking in is wrong. And it's okay for it to be wrong because it's somebody else's property.
mm,
Now, this person who's breaking in is doing it because it's the economy in which the streets have forced them in.
mm,
So those 2 things can be true at the same time. You see
mm.
what I'm saying?
Yes,
You
yes.
feel bad that somebody broke the law and broke into your personal space.
Mhm,
Great. You should feel bad, right?
mhm,
That
mhm.
should not happen.
Yeah.
And you can feel, gosh, the person who thought that they needed to do that must be in such a terrible place in their heart and in their life
Mhm,
and experiencing
mhm,
such terrible things that they felt that that is what they needed to do. So those 2 things can
mm.
both exist at the same time, not one or the other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And honestly, what's best for that person who broke in is to encounter a relationship that helps them come to realize that they don't need to do that anymore because these
Mm,
other services are available for them.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
really the end goal there, right? Because we
Wow.
don't want people going, "Oh, that low life broke in." We don't want that. We
Yes,
don't want
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But we also don't wanna eliminate, yeah, just break all the rules. It's cool because of your situation. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right, right,
We
there has
also
to be
don't
a
wanna fall
balance.
in Yeah, we also don't wanna
Yeah,
fall into that as well, and
yeah.
when we have events for our families, everybody appreciates the boundaries and the rules we have in place. Otherwise, we would have ultimate chaos, you
Mhm,
know?
mhm,
It's actually we have housing for a few of our families. A couple years ago, we got into starting to house families, and our hope houses are based on kind of that principle, right? Where the rules and the boundaries surround you. So it helps you to make a better decision for yourself.
mhm,
And so instead of acquiring property that has, a bunch of units, we can get as many families in as possible. We chose to go a different route, which was a residential lot that already had a house, but was coded so that we can add maybe 2 more units on it. And so we house 3 families instead of 50, but they're in a residential neighborhood. They're surrounded by residences in that residential community, and that community alone puts up boundaries because it's a residential community on behaviors and
mm,
choices,
mm,
decisions.
mhm,
And they know that by living in that house in this residential community, they can go for a ride on bikes and experience what it feels like to be in that family
mhm,
atmosphere, that healthy
mhm,
family atmosphere. They
mhm.
also know that they're not going to have behaviors that would draw the police in because that's not the kind of neighborhood that they're living in.
Yeah.
And so because of that environment, those boundaries are just kind of there already, and
Mm,
it helps
mhm.
them. It helps them to make a different decision, where if they're in an apartment complex with 50 people, you're literally just bringing the street into the
Into the
building.
part, yeah. So that
And
by placing those families in that type of residential space, it models. Does it
exactly.
model? It models.
Because a lot of them are, if not all of them, quite honestly, are coming from broken homes.
Yeah.
They're not coming from intact families. They're coming
Mhm,
from abusive homes. They're
mhm,
coming from social, societal environments where there's lots of gang activity, there's lots of chaos, there's lots of police and criminal activity, literally in their in where they're from. To bring them into this environment is so different for them.
Mm,
that they're just it's foreign and it takes time for them to adjust, but the
mhm,
adjustment that has to take place is emotionally, right?
mm,
Because the adjustment is, "I'm not used to this," right? "This feels weird to me. I'm not good enough for this."
mm.
And that's what we're trying to teach our families that, yes, you are. You
Yes.
belong in
Yeah.
whatever neighborhood you want to live in, regardless of where you've ever lived and how much money you have.
Right.
You are good enough for this,
Ah,
right?
so good.
And so by experiencing that type of environment, it helps them to see that they're worthy of all this. Of course they
Mhm.
are.
Mhm.
Of course, your kids are worthy to get on their bikes and ride safely around their neighborhood
Yeah, and not
and
be
go on a family
approached.
walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well, you
because they've
said
never experienced it, it's hard for them to believe that they can have that.
yeah. Well, I just love under your in your website, under the "What We Believe" section is, "Humans are sacred, relationships are vital, you're the answer." That's so good. People need to go to your website. I just love it
Yes.
so much. I've been reading I mean, I would read it verbatim because it's just so good, but hearing it from you, like, it's yeah, it's fantastic. Why hasn't the government paid attention? Why hasn't, government officials or have they reached out to you and say, "Okay, guys, like, we're screwing it up royally. We're throwing millions of dollars down the toilet, essentially, not having a solution." Because from what I see out here in Seattle is essentially what you're saying. Let's just house them in this giant hotel where they develop their own rules and their own, kind of subculture within a subculture. How does that help? Or for a long time, because Seattle has become much more metropolitan and very wealthy, they just put everybody on a bus and ship them to the neighboring city that's a little, not as metropolitan-esque. And then that city has to deal with the homeless issues in a kind of like, we're just gonna drop these people off and you guys deal with it now because now it's
Yeah.
not in our jurisdiction to have to deal with it. What's been your
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah. I
with
mean,
big
I've
government?
sat at those tables with the mayor and council members, and we try and sit at those tables as often as possible. One, to help change the chip on how homelessness is thought of, right?
Mhm,
Incorporating the lived experience. And over the years, I have seen some of those changes made. I'm starting to see some of the language changing in regards to this is a person, right?
yeah,
And we need to look at a more relational approach. They're using the language, they're still stuck on thinking that there's a solution to the
mhm,
problem.
mhm,
And for SOFESA, there's no solution to homelessness because we believe that at the center of homelessness is not a policy, it's a
mm,
person.
mm,
Right? It's not a policy, it's not a house, it's not a housing unit. That's
mm,
not how you solve this person's problem, right? If John, that I was explaining to you earlier, and
mhm,
he has been, was given a motel unit to live in, he wouldn't take it
mm,
because it's not the unit that is the solve, it's the person that needs healing.
mm,
John needs healthy relationship within his community. John needs to feel like he's not invisible. John needs to feel like his community values him as a person and
mhm,
isn't just trying to get rid of him or put him away somewhere so that they don't have to see him or
mhm,
interact with him or
mhm,
engage with him. Right? So, we have tried and we are seeing some changes. Listen, Mayor Bass, right? Since she came in, she's a hard worker. I'll give her that. She is a hard worker.
mm,
She's put a ton of money into solving homelessness. So, it's not about needing a good leader who works hard because we've had that. I can
mhm,
honestly say that
mhm,
Mayor Bass has worked hard to solve homelessness. But that's the problem. And it's not about money and it's
mm,
not about solving.
mhm,
And so you you need a different game plan. And honestly, what we've learned over the years is that the government isn't the right entity to provide the relationship that's required to help people in need.
mm,
They're not. When was the
Mhm.
last time you went to the DMV and walked out feeling like you just had a therapy appointment? It's like,
Never.
never. You have
Never.
ever been to the Social Security office? Do you feel loved and nourished and comforted after going to Social
No,
Security?
those
I've never have.
people are, like, sitting there because it's a job. You gotta give
It's
it
a
to them
job,
for that. It's
and it's supposed to be a job. That's exactly my point. They have a job to do, not a
Mhm.
person to heal,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So, and
Mhm.
that's the thing is we've dumped a ton of taxes into this, and
Mm.
we've created this industry, and now I think for the most part, people feel like we need to solve homelessness, and it's the government's job to do it, and that is the opposite of how
Yeah.
we heal homelessness.
Yeah.
That's the you're the answer.
Yeah. I mean, I I can amen you right now. Like that I mean, this is why we haven't, us personally as an organization, we have not touched federal money. We have not tied
Goodness.
ourselves to the government because it comes with so many strings and it comes with people so disconnected from the
Yeah.
actual on the grounds person that's walking through my clinic going, I have I feel like I have no option right now. I feel
Mhm.
like I have no voice. My own voice is being taken away. I just think of, like, the folks that are sitting in King County Board of Health. Have they ever talked to someone, that's on the street or facing an unplanned pregnancy, facing an STI that is life-changing, life-altering? I don't know. Not in my opinion, not that I have seen.
And even if they have, what was the purpose of the talk?
Right.
See, for me,
Yes.
it's deeper than that because
Yeah.
they've figured that out here in LA. Oh, yeah, we have a whole committee of previously homeless people that
Yeah.
we talk to all the time. Well, okay, but it's not just about talking to
Mm,
people. It's about taking data and information,
mm,
pulling the insights out of it, and then employing those insights into a healthy relationship.
mm,
That's what we need to do. Not just talk to people and say, "Hey, how do you feel about us using this word?" Okay, I mean, I guess that's okay, but it's deeper than that.
mm,
I don't like yes, let's talk to them. But more importantly, how about if somebody's in front of us, we find out who this person is and
mm,
have a relationship with them. And
mhm,
I'm not talking about like every person you meet has to be this long-term relationship. I'm talking about talking to them in a way that you are truly interested in learning something from them and getting that identity from them,
mhm,
right?
mm.
They're a person.
Yeah,
These people are people.
yeah. Allowing them to imprint on you in some
Yeah.
way, right? That's much
Yeah,
deeper than like, "Ooh, that's good language. Let's incorporate it into a policy."
right. It's like the intent is because you're trying to solve something and create a new policy.
Yeah.
When my when I encounter someone, my intent is to encounter them.
Mm,
What comes from it, but I'm not going in with a particular mission for something. My mission is to find out who you are because I
mhm,
honestly believe that I'm in front of you right now because that's what's supposed to be.
mhm,
And
mhm,
there's something that's supposed to be in this interaction with you, and I'm completely open to whatever that is and
mhm.
wherever that takes me. That just might be me with my rose-colored glasses on, but I honestly believe if
That's
people did
beautiful.
more of that, we would have a lot less to pay in taxes, honestly.
Well, we would be healing a culture that is very broken, that we
Yeah.
created in a lot of ways. But your approach, Jess, what from just dealing with government officials ourselves and reproductive health, your approach takes too much time. It
Well,
takes
yeah, and that's
it
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's they don't have time. Also, unfortunately, how does that accumulate into dollars?
of course.
How is how is that sexy,
Yeah,
right? How is that
exactly.
sexy? How is that
Takes
flashy?
too much time, it's gonna cost us too much money to do that, and what they don't
Mhm,
realize is that
mhm,
now 3 years and $2.2 billion later, they're 10% higher in their numbers. So I would argue that, and I can argue that now because now those numbers are available, and that's what I plan on doing.
yeah,
It actually we're gonna be posting some socials here soon over the next month that talk exactly about this. The idea that they think it takes too much time is a lie. 'Cause one
Mhm,
of the biggest things that people don't know is that our families that we accompany, it's a cycle. They'll do everything they're told, they'll wait, they'll get crisis housing, transitional housing, and then permanent housing, which is usually only 2 years here. Permanent housing, and then hopefully they'll be able to get into their own Section 8 or low income unit, and
mhm,
then there, if they don't make it, they are right back out on the street and they're starting the process all over again. And that's what we do. We accompany them through this on a consistent basis.
mm,
And that's what the government doesn't realize is that your money is only focused on getting them here, here, and here. And then once they're here, you don't have retention rates. Do you know how many times I've been in a meeting and I've asked, well, what are the retention rates for that particular community? Nothing. Crickets. They have no answer on retention rates. Well, those 15 people you pulled out of the encampment and put in here, how many are still there? And where are the others that aren't? That's what SOFESA does. We stay in a relationship, and we have for 25 years.
mm,
We're actually gonna be releasing this data at our annual luncheon this year in August. We are currently collecting all that data on that cycle and the numbers on how many of our families have gone through that cycle and haven't been able to retain housing for the sole purpose of giving people retention rates
yeah,
and the truth about it
right,
because
yes. How is
I can't find them anywhere.
how is permanent housing 2 years?
Yeah, yeah, that has to do with, like, again, the industry. It's an
Yeah,
industry.
yeah.
Permanent housing is 2 years unless you're in government housing, Section 8, low income
Mhm,
housing,
mhm.
which I've had families and this is actually a true story. I have a family who was on the wait list for 5 years,
Yeah.
just got the approval, the application she can put in her application now. She submitted everything. We helped her with everything. It was a beautiful application.
Ugh.
It was perfect. She's got 6 kids and she's pregnant, married.
Ugh.
Right? All of them are living in a two-bedroom, like, back garage unit, right? They need a bigger space, but they've been housed back there for a couple years now, and so they put the application in, and do you know they got declined? Can I tell you why they got declined? Because the unit that they requested, you can request particular size units, had a maximum income value that you can make of like 1,600 and some change a month. And between her and her husband, they make 1,800 and some change a month. With 6 kids and another one on the way, by the way, 1,800 a month. So they are disqualified, and they didn't say, "You don't qualify for this unit, you qualify for this unit." They
Mhm.
declined her entire application and told her that she can reapply to get on the waiting list for that other unit. It blows my mind.
Mm.
And I just felt so bad. I was like, "We can appeal this." And she's like, she's exhausted. She waited
Yeah.
5 years for this.
So
5
infuriating.
years. And the place where they applied for this housing is an hour outside of LA. They would have to pick up everything they know and completely relocate outside of the area in order to be able to have this stable housing. And that's what they were willing to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Declined because they make $200 a month that when they pick up and they move, they probably wouldn't even be making anymore.
Exactly. I was just gonna
I
say that.
it's it's no, it's policy driven, it's not people driven, it's not taking into consideration all of the circumstances around a family's living environment and what they're in, and it's transactional.
Yeah.
That was a transaction.
Yeah. Well, the piece of paper was just a piece of paper. The decline was just numbers on a screen, probably. It's not the faces of the 6 people, the 6 children, that whoever was the gatekeeper saw. It was just a piece of paper, and you're just a number. And yeah, I mean, as I was a social worker, case manager for a long time, and these were the types of situations that I came across a lot of the times. And I'm no longer case manager, obviously, and no longer a part of that world, but it just I just wanted to be like, "Okay, guess what? We're gonna do some shady stuff right now, and we're gonna bypass this, rule," and it just got to a point where I'm like, "No wonder the system is freaking broken," because
Yeah.
I, as a gatekeeper, kept having to perpetuate it even
Yep.
when I know it goes against everything that makes sense.
Yes.
It's not logical,
Absolutely.
it doesn't align with, any of our values, but the red tape ties my hands,
Yeah. Yeah.
or I remember I had a client who was in an abusive relationship, and she didn't even have money, he didn't even her husband wouldn't even allow her to buy tampons.
Mm.
So, I went and bought a box of tampons for her at Walgreens, and do you know how much trouble I got in?
Mm.
Because it was outside of my role.
Right.
As her advocate. It was
Yeah.
outside of my role, and I have a young Vietnamese woman crying her eyes out because she's freaking had to beg her husband for money for tampons, and he wouldn't give it to her. And I walked her down to Walgreens, we got a pack of tampons, and I was in trouble for it,
Yeah.
It's just things like
And that's
that.
the problem with it. That's the problem with the government homeless industry.
Yeah.
The private sector needs to stand up and say, "I've had enough.
Mm. Mhm.
I want lower taxes so that I can use my money to do something myself." And
Mm.
we are perfectly capable. We are
Mhm.
perfectly capable as a private sector
Mm.
to stand up in each one of our local communities, like what 3W is doing in your community and SOFESA
Mhm.
is doing here, and saying, in my local community, this is what I see is needed. And I am going to rally the people in my local community, and we're going to start this. And we're going to do it with our local money from the private
Mhm.
sector. And we're going to run it without those restrictions because the system that's been set in place to help people is flawed and
Mhm.
needs I hate even saying that it needs reform. It needs to be abolished, quite honestly. Like
Yeah.
it just needs to go away.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
I completely agree. Yeah.
but it can't. It can't until people like us stand up and say, "I'll do this.
Yeah.
I need to do this. My community will do this."
Yeah, 'cause that's why I walked away from case management, and, although it caused me much grief and pain because I went to school to be a case manager, right? I
Mm,
walked away from it because I was like, "I'm not doing any good. I'm not doing any good. I'm not doing any of my clients any favors." And
mm.
I'm just sick and tired of it. It was against my values, it was against my morals. This is not why I became a social worker in the first place, and I'm just perpetuating a system that doesn't work. So I'm gonna walk away and do my own thing.
And I'm
Mhm.
so glad you did. But we also have to recognize because I encounter and have relationships with so many other partner agencies that are
Mhm.
government run and government
Mhm.
money, and they feel
Mhm.
trapped, right? They
Yes.
feel like they don't
Yes.
have they're not in a situation because they're supporting their family to be able to get up and say, I'm gonna go do this on my own,
Yes.
and I wish they would, but I
Mhm.
respect their situation. And so they're kind of stuck
Yes.
having to be there doing what they disagree with because
'Cause
it's
it's
their particular
something.
circumstance. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yep.
Totally
Yep.
agree. Yeah. How can 3W, a place that provides free healthcare to women, actual healthcare to women, that in my opinion is not transactional, or even that type of, relationship that we've been talking about, how can we be more of service to the woman that's on the street, to the child that's on the street? Putting yourself back into your 14-year-old self when you were on the streets, and I approached you, or what could we do? What could we say that you think would have made a difference?
Well, I mean, the first thing would be just to tell me who you are,
Mhm.
because when you tell me who you are, that means that you're giving me the gift of your identity.
Mm,
And that's a huge gift.
mm,
When if I'm homeless on the street and somebody walks up to me and says, "Hey, my name is Jessica.
mhm,
How are you?" You know, and not even asking their name, which will come, but most likely
mhm,
it'll be a made up name. You won't get the
mm,
real one.
mhm,
But like just offering a part of yourself to
mm,
someone
mm,
and allowing yourself to be vulnerable in that way. And I say this because 2 things can exist at the same time again, right? Right? You don't put yourself in a situation that's dangerous
mm,
by doing
mhm,
this,
mhm,
right? So you educate yourself, you learn about homelessness and lived experience, and with that education, then you're able to be in a better situation to encounter someone. You do that research first, and then you just encounter them by being vulnerable and compassionate yourself.
mm,
Like, the homeless love to tell their story,
mm,
but most people who go out to listen to it are exploiting them for some reason or another, right? There's a few organizations out there that share homeless stories. They share it because they say, "Oh, the homeless person gave me consent. It's okay." But, there's lots of situations when I was homeless that I gave consent and it was a terrible decision on my part and I was being exploited. My
mm,
consent really wasn't, I have a choice. So,
mm,
acknowledging that the homeless person is in a vulnerable situation and can be very easily used and exploited even with their consent,
mm,
which is why at the heart of everything that we share and say is about healthy relationship.
mm,
How would you have a healthy relationship with someone? That's what we encourage. For something like 3W, you offer, medical services to women
and men.
and men. Oh, okay.
Mhm,
Oh, that's
mhm.
right. I didn't
Yeah, yeah,
men and women. Yeah. I mean, it's all about, I guess with homelessness, like we don't feel like we belong anywhere if
yeah.
we're on the street, right? We only belong in our tent, in our encampment, in our car, in our motel.
We hear a lot of when we do get to encounter a woman on the street that's come in, been a consistent pattern of we've been really mishandled by the medical community, by the greater medical community. There is I don't trust. I have had a patient say, I'm just gonna be real with you right now. I really don't trust what you're telling me. I'm here because I'm in pain and this is my last resort and I just need to get tested, or like I'm having vaginal issues. I just need the prescription and let me go along my merry
Yeah.
way. So there's this distrust within the medical community with the homeless population that I haven't even scratched the surface of understanding. I don't y-
It doesn't sound like distrust. It sounds like that's the word they're using as a
mm,
defense mechanism, but it
mm,
sounds like they're being very transactional, which is what
yes.
they've been exposed to.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
again, going back to what I said, they only know how to transact now because
Yeah.
there's no healthy relationship on the street. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, even outreach, there's very little healthy relationship even in outreach. There's always the exception. But
Mhm.
that's what it sounds like to me is that you are encountering the homeless who are only wanting a transaction. And
Mm,
the only thing that breaks through that is relationship and
mm,
authenticity.
mm.
So just, like little things to show them that they belong there too,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? They're
Yes.
walking into an environment they do not feel like they belong in. You're their last thing. It
Yes.
took a lot for them to walk in there, and they just wanna get it done and get out because they don't
Mhm.
feel like they belong in that space.
Mhm.
And that's the truth of what the streets do.
Wow. Jess, I've just learned so much from you and
So have I.
Sofisa, what you guys are doing. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It is super healing and powerful and comforting to know that folks like you exist. An organization like yours exist. I know you guys are in the LA area, but is there anything up here that you know of that I don't know?
Yeah. Seattle, I'm trying to think. Not off the
You
top of my head. I
you
have a
would
whole
think that there would be, like,
right?
plenty.
Right.
Ugh,
I think there is like a tiny home village that I'm connected to up there. If it's not in front of me in my list on my computer, I have a
sure,
hard time storing stuff in there. But no,
sure.
look, it's Seattle. I'm not sure about, but I mean, SOFESA comes out nationally and visits everywhere. We're more
Mm,
than happy to come in and do a webinar and sit at a round table and and
Mhm.
share about our experiences with anybody anywhere. But
Mhm.
really, just I love what 3W is doing. Is such a supporter of it. I wish we had it down here.
I
Hint,
wish we
hint.
had a SOFESA up here. Maybe that could be our thing,
That's it.
Jess.
Maybe that's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe that could be the thing. Because I mean, I'm telling you, like, where we're located, we're in the U District is where 3W is located, and it
Yeah,
is camps everywhere right now.
we
Like, I've I used to go to school around here, the University of Washington, so we're right next to the University of Washington,
yeah, yeah.
and 50,000 students. Very rich, very wealthy area, and it is not safe to walk
Mm,
around because you might step on a needle. And
yeah,
and and not to say, like, that's not what comes with the city, because 'cause I'm a city girl and I get it, that's just not out in the country or anything like that, but it's an unrecognizable city right now, and they just keep pushing the homeless in camps to one part of the city to another until
yeah,
someone complains, and then they push them to another corner of the city, and then someone complains, and they push them. There's just seems to be no actual solutions, no actual, like, not solutions, but, like, approach that has been
and
effective.
a strategy, right?
Yeah, no, we just
Have
keep throwing
to
money.
have a strategy in
Yeah,
relationship,
yeah, yeah.
That's where healthy comes from. It's funny, like, when you talk about the needle, the first thing that comes to my mind is the person whose arm it was in, right?
Mhm,
So,
mhm,
a lot of it happens up here. A
mm,
lot of it happens with changing the way we think and see and view things, and I think that
mm,
that can happen. Social media helps us with that, and just when we talk to people in
mhm,
regards to homelessness, in regards to medical care, right? We want to continue that conversation in helping people change how they're thinking about something.
mhm,
Because just like we encounter the homeless and we're trying to change how they think about themselves,
mm,
it's the same thing for the house community. It's the same thing
mhm,
for the wealthy in house, right? We
mhm,
want to
mhm,
have conversations with them that help them change the way they see the homeless person, the way they,
mm,
view the whole idea of someone being homeless.
mm,
Right?
mm,
So there's a lot to do there. Doesn't necessarily have to be starting an organization or having a
mhm,
brick and mortar.
mhm, mhm,
That's a wonderful aspect of technology nowadays is, that chip can be changed overnight,
mm.
with the right amount of shares.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
You know?
so much of what you're saying, it's like humanizing is healing.
Yeah, these
That's
people are
powerful.
people.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh,
People
I
are
mean, you would think that's so logical. So, thank you so much. I feel like we can talk forever.
I
Um,
know.
and just thank you again for what you do. Thank you for what your organization continues to do, has done for the last 25 years. I am just in awe of it. It's just cool. It's just awesome. And
Thank
yeah, I
thank you.
I pray that it just continues to bless more and more people and spread all the way up here. Maybe
Yeah.
that isn't in the too far future, but just thank you for your witness and your story and all that you do. Your heart is just like massive. Thank you. So
Thank
cool.
you. I appreciate that, and
Yeah.
thank you. I mean,
Uh,
look, I said it
yeah.
earlier, I was in 3 different medical clinics coming up in my homeless times, so,
Yeah.
the care that someone receives at 3W, I'm sure is phenomenal, and honestly, I can't wait to come up there and visit you guys.
I would die. Come up.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, please. That would be so cool. Just and then we'll hash out a plan on what to do next so that Sophie
Yes.
is up here.
Yes. Watch out, world.
So, thank you again for your time and your witness and all that you do, and I hope folks that are listening to this conversation, I please look up SOFESA and what they're doing and support them. It just takes one person to like Jess said, it takes one person to continue to change, to make a ripple effect on someone else's life, and it just is just so cool that something like this exists. So, until next time, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Sofisa. I'm sure we'll have you back to talk about other topics because it all intertwines, right? As the human person,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
complex, but thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
For more information about 3W, please visit our website at 3wmedical.org. That's the number 3, the letter W, medical.org. From there, you can learn more information about the services we provide, book an appointment, or make a donation if you'd like to support our mission. You can also call our office at 206-588-0311. That's 206-588-0311. If you like this episode, please share it with others and consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, stay healthy and be well.